میتونید در کفتریا روان کنین کارگاه آموزشی در جریان است.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وخاتم النبيين أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. والصلاة والسلام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين، واللعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين. أما بعد، قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتاب مبين والقرآن المجيد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. My dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. You know, as I was hearing Dr. Liaquat speaking, and he was referring to the time back in 1975, I came to this area in 1980, and literally there was just a handful of Muslims, you know, in the whole capital district area. And look at where we are now, you know. You know, you can count, I mean, as long as my age is, you know, what has happened to the number of Muslim community in the area. And, you know, this sort of foresight, I don't think anybody that was there back in the late 70s or early 80s could have predicted that so many Muslims would have been in this area. This was, you know, I don't think anybody imagined this. Similarly, my dear brothers and sisters, when Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam was asked by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to create the Kaaba, to build the Kaaba in Saudi Arabia, this was a desolate desert where there was hardly any people living there. There was no population there. And he built the Kaaba, and he was instructed to go up on a mountain called Jabal Abu Qubais. And he was asked to call out to the people to come to the Kaaba, to come there, to do the tawaf, to do the sajda, according to the ordinance, you know, from a verse of the Quran. And Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam went and he called out. But realistically, this was of course divine ordinance. This is by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But you and I, if we were standing there watching Ibrahim alayhi salam in the middle of this desert, climbing up on a mountain and going out and calling, would we have ever imagined that many years later there would be over 2 million people who are getting ready to go for Hajj? This would not have been in our imagination. This was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when He asked Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam to go and make this call. He knew what was going to happen. He knew what he was doing. He knew what there was wisdom in what he was saying. Now, one of the things that I face, questions that I face sometimes in discussions, not that people are coming to ask me these questions, but there's a discussion a lot of the times. For example, that when an earthquake occurs, you know, so many thousands of people, they die and become homeless. And the question arises, why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make something like that happen? What is the wisdom in all of these things? Why create all this suffering and all of these, you know, difficulties for people? When you have wars, when you have floods, when you have hurricanes, you know, we see that lots of people end up suffering. Now, hurricanes and earthquakes, these are not caused by human beings. This is caused obviously by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you know, and the consequences of this are felt by human beings and all the difficulties that we face. Now, if I were to go and tell somebody, look, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is wise, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has wisdom, and we believe this, we have yaqeen in this, we have faith in this. But then it becomes difficult to answer that why would a loving God that you and I believe in, create circumstances where the end result of it is the suffering of people. To answer this question, it's kind of complicated, but I will try my best, inshallah wa ta'ala. Let's take an example that if a person is on the rooftop of a high-rise building, say it's 50, 60 stories, and this person is standing on this rooftop and he has a binocular, with him that he can see, things that are far, he can see it because he has a binocular. On this same building, at the bottom, there is another guy who is just standing there by the sidewalk of this building. And he doesn't have any binoculars, but he sees whatever is happening, that is happening around him. There was a time when Prophet Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, he was told by his people that, "Oh Musa, we believe that you are the most smartest person that is living on this earth. There is nobody else who is more wiser, who is more knowledgeable than you, O Musa." So Musa alayhi salam started to question himself that, and he was being careful that by taking this praise that he was getting from this person, he should not become arrogant. So he asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, "Ya Allah, am I the one who has the most knowledge? Today in the whole existence of human beings, am I the one who has the most knowledge?" Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals to Prophet Musa alayhi salam, and he says, "I want you to go to meet a person who has more knowledge than you do." So this is the setup of the meeting that occurs between Prophet Musa alayhi salam and Khidr. On the way, I've stopped that story about the building and I'll come to it in a minute. On the way, when he started to search for Khidr, there is a very strange thing that happens, because he was told that you will find Khidr at a place where the two seas, the two waterways, the two oceans meet. And him, and at that time Joshua or Yusha bin Nun was his traveling companion. They put a little lunch pack and some food together. In that was a dried fish, like a fish sandwich, if you want to call it that. And with that, they started their journey. And Musa alayhi salam was now very, very adamant that I am going to find this person that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordered me to go and meet. And I will find him and I'll see that there is somebody, or there may be somebody, who is more knowledgeable than I am. So as they are leaving and they are going on their way, they stop at a certain place to rest. And when they stop to rest, the dried fish that was inside the sandwich that they had prepared became suddenly alive, and it jumped into the water and it swam away. Musa alayhi salam was asleep at that time. But Yusha saw it. Yusha bin Nun, he saw what had happened. And they woke up and they started to continue their journey. Musa alayhi salam was told that this is the sign that you will see, and that is the place where you have to start looking for this person. And they walked a certain way, and Musa alayhi salam asked to see, they stopped, and he asked to let's have some lunch. And when Yusha went, he remembered. Oh Musa, oh Prophet Musa, this fish that we had prepared all of a sudden became alive and jumped into the water and swam away. Musa alayhi salatu salam says, that is the place that we have to go. That is where we have to find this person who is more knowledgeable, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has asked me to go and meet. So they turned back and they started to go back to this place, and there they found Khidr alayhi salam. So Musa alayhi salam introduced himself to Prophet Khidr. Khidr says, "You are Musa, the one who spoke with Allah." And Musa alayhi salam says, "Yes, I am." And he says, "I have come here to learn more from you." So Khidr responds to Prophet Musa alayhi salam, and he tells him that, how are you going to be able to understand what I know when you have absolutely no idea about the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala beyond the knowledge that you have? Musa alayhi salam was a prophet, Ulul Azam prophet. So his knowledge was not little, it was high knowledge. And Musa alayhi salam said in response to him, then that is why I am here. Khidr says to him that you will not be able to bear what you will see. Because he told Prophet Musa that what the world and the knowledge that you have is for a completely different purpose, and the knowledge that I have is for a completely different purpose. I go back to my example about the high-story building with the guy that's standing on the rooftop and the one that's sitting by the sidewalk. The person that's standing on the rooftop with the binoculars can see the surrounding area to a larger distance, and if there was something dangerous that was coming across in the direction that they were in, that person would be able to spot it before the person who was sitting by the sidewalk. And if he tells the person on the sidewalk, listen, close the doors, get inside the building because something is coming, the person would look up and says, everything is fine over here. I don't see any problem. But the person says, no, I am able to see further than you, and that is why I am warning you. There is something dangerous that's going to happen. You should go and go to a place and secure yourself. I am using the example to illustrate one thing, my dear brothers and sisters, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His position in terms of being the creator and for everything that we see on this earth is like that person who was standing at the 50th floor with a set of binoculars. The difference is that the binoculars of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not limited to how far the binoculars can see. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's binoculars can see years ahead, can see years in the past, and there is no limit to how far things, that He can visualize things. Think for a moment that way back, some of the kids here don't even remember that when Russia invaded Afghanistan, and your forefathers, many of the people who are here, their forefathers who were in Afghanistan, would you have ever imagined that in 2025 you would be here in Albany? No. Those things happened that created other events, and finally, whatever happened, people started to migrate out of Afghanistan into Albany. What I am trying to say is that your presence in Albany in 2025 has a purpose from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is not something that happened just out of the blues. Each and every one of us who is here has been designated by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be here, in the way that we have migrated. So Musa alayhi salam and Khidr are talking, and Khidr says that, listen, you will not be able to bear the knowledge that I am going to tell you. Musa alayhi salam said, no, I will go with you, and inshallah, you will find me, amongst the patients. Now, the story of Khidr and Musa, many of you already know. I'm going to go over it very, very quickly, but there is a reason why, we're going to talk about this. When they sail out, they go out and they go near a dock where they wanted to cross a waterway, and both Musa alayhi salam and Khidr alayhi salam decided to take a ride on this boat to go wherever they wanted to go. So they get on board of the boat, and as this boat belonged to a bunch of poor sailors who basically made some money with fishing and transferring people here and there. So when they boarded the boat, a bird came by. This is in Bihar al-Anwar, and the bird was darting from one side to the other, taking little sips of water and moving from one side to the other. And the narration said that Khidr smiled, and he asked Musa alayhi salam, and he says to Musa alayhi salam that, do you know what this bird is trying to tell us? And Musa alayhi salam said, no, I don't know what he's trying to say. They said, the bird is telling us that this sip of this water that it is carrying, is similar to our combined knowledge, mine and yours. And it is so small, it's like the sip of this water in relationship to the entire ocean that you see here. And even less than that. So the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is vast. So as the sailors came in and they were just about to embark, Khidr makes a hole inside on the floor of the bottom. And Musa alayhi salam just exclaimed, Ya Khidr, what are you doing? This boat is going to sink. The sailors just, attacked them and they kicked them off the boat and they started to walk. And Musa alayhi salam was complaining to Khidr. Khidr said to Musa alayhi salam, didn't I tell you that, you will not be able to bear what I am doing. You will not be able to be patient. So Musa alayhi salam apologized. He said, no, I'm sorry, I will not repeat this again. And they continued in their journey. As they are moving along, they come across a young boy who was playing somewhere. And Khidr alayhi salam went, took out a blade, and he slaughtered this young boy. What do you think the reaction was Musa alayhi salam? He immediately said, what are you doing? You just killed an innocent child. And Khidr alayhi salam said, listen, I told you, you will not be able to have patience, with what it is that I'm doing. Musa alayhi salam, he apologized again. And Khidr said, this is it. If you are not able to be patient the next time, we're done. So they continue moving and they come across a village and they're both hungry and they ask the people of the village if they can have something to eat. The people of the village refused. They were not hospitable at all. They didn't give them any kind of hospitality. So disappointed, they started to walk and they noticed that there was a wall created somewhere which was beginning to collapse. So Khidr alayhi salam decided to go and start reconstructing this wall and bringing it and making it upright again. So he does that, and as they are walking away, Musa alayhi salam again turns to Khidr and he says to him that, by putting all this labor in putting this wall up, you could have easily gone to the people of the village and you could have asked them for some money with which we could have bought some food and satisfy our hunger. And Khidr turned to Musa alayhi salam and said, listen, this is it. This is it. This is final. This is where you and I are going to get separated. So Musa alayhi salam was a bit disappointed, but then Khidr turns around to him and he says, listen, I will explain to you all these three events so that you will be able to understand. He says, okay. So Khidr says to him, he says, that as for the boat that we had gotten on, and I made a hole inside the boat, the reason why I did that is because in this area, the king is a tyrant. And he was getting ready to confiscate all the boats that belong to the people there and take ownership of these boats. So my intention was to create a defect, some kind of a defect inside this boat, so that when the king's people, they come to confiscate this boat, they see the hole in it and they will leave it alone and they won't buy it. They won't confiscate it. So I said, okay, what about the young boy? It says that young boy that I killed belonged to, righteous parents. And it was revealed to me by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that this child was going to grow up and he's going to become rebellious. And he's going to turn against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And because the parents love him so much, he would have swayed the parents also to follow him. The parents would have been dissuaded by their child because of the love of this child. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, take care of this child. We will grant these parents a new child, another child. So they say, okay, what about the wall? So they get to the wall. Khidr explains. He says, underneath this wall was buried a treasure that belonged to a righteous man who had 2 orphans that were living in this village. I was afraid that if this wall continues to collapse, this treasure would be exposed and the people of this town would come and they would grab this treasure and the 2 orphans would not be able to get benefit from the inheritance of their father. So I went and I built this wall and I preserved this treasure. So this was the explanation of these 3 events that Khidr did. Now, Khidr explained that there was something that was going to happen in the future that only Allah knows, and through Allah, Khidr knew about it. And what was happening was the intervention of Khidr to try and prevent a bigger harm that was going to happen later on. So Khidr says, this is a knowledge by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for which I perform this act. This is not an action that I performed on my own. So let's look at this story from a different perspective. Now, I'm coming to this point where people sometimes complain, why is this happening to me? Why are, children sick in the hospital? Why are all these difficulties and calamities happening? And sometimes even personalized. Why I cannot get ahead in my life? Why can't things go the way that I want? Let's look at this story from the perspective of those who were affected by it. Number one, the sailors. The sailors whose boat was saved because of the hole that Khidr had created inside, they were able to realize right away that when the king's men came and they left the boat alone, they probably thought, thank God that those guys that came on the boat, they created the defect, and the king did not take our boat, and the boat is with us. At the time when the hole was made, they had no realization of this. But later on, when their boat was saved because of the hole, they said, oh, the maslihat of this was that our boat would be saved. Let's look at the child. The child that was killed, that mother of that child never could find out why the child was killed. She probably would never ever realize that this child of hers whom she loved was killed, and that Allah would replace her with another child. The riwayat says that did happen. And she probably continued to miss this child for the rest of her life, never realizing that the harm that was going to come upon them was removed by the child that was taken away, the child that she loved was taken away by them. She would never realize that happened. And on the third portion, those orphans, nobody would ever know that this action happened because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected these orphans, and this treasure nobody knew about. Nobody knew about the fact that the father of this child had left this for their orphans, and later on when their orphans would go and be able to, however they are able to, go and retrieve this treasure, they will never have realized that there were two men that had come to this town and they had built this wall to save this treasure of ours. They would never know that. So there was khair for them in what had happened. So my dear brothers and sisters, in terms of what is going to happen in the future, you and I have no knowledge and have no understanding of it. And sometimes it is because of that, there's those things that happen to us today and especially if we perceive them, as bad, as something that is harmful, that's something that is, somehow difficult for us, that there is khair in it. This can only come to you and I if we have this high level of trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this tawakkul in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There are those who, when a difficulty comes to them, they start, reacting to it, in a very emotional kind of a way. And there are those who control their emotions and they will say, Allah knows best. Maybe there is khair in it. And the difference between these two types of people is what? Is that the one who says, inshallah, there is khair in it, has developed within themselves this tawakkul, this trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to such a level that, the difficulties that they face in life, never phases them. So as they were parting, Musa alayhi salam and Khidr, as they were parting, Musa alayhi salam says, that you have been given all this knowledge, maybe you can share something with me as we part, as we separate. And Khidr says, yes, I'll give you some words of advice. And listen to what Khidr says. Now this is Khidr who has the knowledge that has been given to him by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. By the way, Dua Kumail that we recite on Thursday nights, it was given to Imam Ali according to narrations by Khidr. It's actually Dua Khidr that was given to Imam Ali alayhi salatu wasalam. So, and Khidr is one of those people who has been given life indefinitely until the day of, he will die at the end of time, like Prophet Isa alayhi salam. So, and he has met prophets and he has met the Imam. So this Khidr is giving these pieces of advice, and inshallah, you and I can learn from it. Khidr tells to Musa alayhi salam, he says that never judge a person who has sinned, by the sin that they have committed. Don't insult those people or don't judge people because you know about a sin that they have committed. And, this is something that, a lot of us, we do this. We know somebody is committing any kind of a mistake or, is slipping and is disobedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we judge that person because remember one thing, my dear brothers and sisters, that one action or good action from that person can remove all the sins of that person, and that person can end up in paradise because of one good action. So we should not be judgmental, about people. He says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves the people who are moderate even when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them a lot of wealth. Rich people who just use their wealth and live in a wasteful kind of a way is something that is despised by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Khizr is telling Musa alayhi salam that, this is the advice you have to give people, that they'll have to live in moderation, in modesty, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them plenty. And he says that people should develop the ability to forgive people who have done any harm to them, despite their ability to take revenge on these people. We should all learn to have a nature of forgiving other people, and by that hope for the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then Khidr says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves those people who are gentle with his servants, who deal with their servants in a gentle kind of a way, in a kind way, in a compassionate way. And Khidr says to Musa alayhi salam that if a person deals with people in a gentle kind of a way, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be gentle to him on the day of judgment. And finally, Khidr tells to Prophet Musa alayhi salam that the ultimate wisdom, the ultimate hikmat anybody wants to gain is going to be gained by somebody who is going to be a muttaqi, a person who is going to be God conscious. This month of Ramadan, the ayah that I cited, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O people who believe, kutiba alaykum as-siyam kama kutiba ala alladhina min qablikum, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that I have ordained fasting upon you as I have ordained fasting upon the people that were there before you, la'allakum tattaqun, so that you are able to develop this quality of God-wariness, of taqwa. And what is God-wariness? In the most simplest words, taqwa is a work in progress for every one of us. It's not like I do something and become a muttaqi. It's a constant struggle that you and I, have to face on a daily life. Basically, my dear brothers and sisters, taqwa is to be in a state of mind that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching my every action, my every decision. And any decision that I take, any act that I do, anything that I perform, I have to bear in mind that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is looking at it, considering it, and I am going to be held accountable, for this action. Whether it is going to be in terms of a reward or whether it is going to be in terms of a punishment. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Ghafurur Rahim, my dear brothers and sisters, and that is why this is called, the month of Ramadan is called the month of mercy. Okay, this is the month that we can ask for mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He is ready to give it to us. And let's take, brothers and sisters, advantage, during these days of Shahr Ramadan to get the best of the mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. With that, my dear brothers and sisters, let us raise our hands and pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that number one, that we are able to develop the quality of being amongst the muttaqeen, amongst the salihin, amongst the siddiqeen, and amongst those people who will be in the hereafter, near in the neighborhood of His most chosen servants, inshallah. We ask to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect our faith, to protect the faith of our children, to protect our faith in general. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that in this month He gives us the tawfiq to take advantage of every minute, every second, to try and gain closeness to Him, inshallah wa ta'ala. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the reappearance of our 12th Imam and to give us the tawfiq, inshallah, to be amongst his companion and to be his assistants to create justice and amn in the rest, in the world, for the amount of the time that Imam alayhi salam, has been assigned for. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala ali baytihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
We're going to recite Dua Iftitah and then after that we will conclude inshallah. برنامه را با تلاوت دعای افتتاح انشالله خاتمه میدیم.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أفتتح الثناء بحمدك وأنت مسدد للصواب بمنك، وأيقنت أنك أنت أرحم الراحمين في موضع العفو والرحمة، وأشد المعاقبين في موضع النكال والنقمة، وأعظم المتجبرين في موضع الكبرياء والعظمة. اللهم أذنت لي في دعائك ومسألتك، فاسمع يا سميع مدحتي، وأجب يا رحيم دعوتي، وأقل يا غفور عثرتي، فكم يا إلهي